The cold morning air bit through Elder Day-One's worn robes as he walked down the stone steps toward the dragon caves. His old bones ached with each step, but the pain in his heart hurt far worse. Today would be the last day he would see the great beasts that had served his family for 1,000 years. Behind him, the dying city of Corvex Prime stretched across the barren landscape. Once, millions of people had lived here under bright blue skies. Flying ships had filled the air like metal birds, and the great dragons had soared between the clouds carrying riders to distant worlds. Now, only 50,000 souls remained, huddled in underground shelters as their sun grew dim and cold. The dragon caves sat deep beneath the city, carved from living rock by the first Villani settlers. Ancient symbols covered the walls, telling stories of the bond between dragon and rider. Day-One had learned to read these symbols as a young boy, back when the clan ruled 12 worlds and commanded respect across the galaxy. He stopped before the first cave entrance. A low rumble echoed from within, followed by the scrape of massive claws against stone. Skyrender was awake. The great silver dragon had lived for 300 years, long enough to carry Day-One's grandfather into battle against the hegemony forces. Now the beast was the last male of his kind on this world. "Old friend," Day-One whispered, his voice barely carrying in the vast chamber. "I have come to say goodbye." A huge head emerged from the shadows, scales gleaming like polished metal even, in the dim light. Skyrender's golden eyes fixed on the old man, and for a moment neither moved. Dragons could not speak in human words, but they understood much. The beast lowered his great head until it touched Day-One's shoulder. Tears ran down the elder's face as he placed both hands on the warm scales. "I am sorry. There is no other way." Heavy footsteps echoed behind him. Captain Su-Jin emerged from the tunnel, her military uniform dirty from the long journey underground. Her face was grim as she approached, clutching a datapad in her hands. "Elder, the transport ships have arrived in orbit," she said quietly. "The buyers are ready to take delivery." Day-One nodded but did not turn around. "And our people?" "The evacuation ships are loaded. 30,000 souls ready to leave for Baron's Edge. The rest chose to stay and die with the homeworld." Su-Jin's voice cracked slightly. "The atmospheric processors have maybe 2 months of power left. After that..." She did not need to finish. They both knew what would happen when the machines that kept their air breathable finally failed. The lucky ones would die quickly when the poisoned atmosphere filled their lungs. The others would freeze as their dying sun could no longer warm. "The surface. Show me the contracts," Day-One said. Su-Jin activated her datapad, and numbers filled the screen. Even after the buyers took their profit, the sale would bring enough money to relocate their people, buy new equipment, and start fresh on a frontier world. It was a fortune that could save thousands of lives, but the price was everything that made them who they were. Young Minho burst into the chamber, his boots splashing through puddles of condensation. The warrior was barely 25 years old, with the hot blood of youth still burning in his veins. His hand rested on the plasma sword at his side, and his dark eyes blazed with anger. "Elder, you cannot do this thing," he said, breathing hard from his run through the tunnels. "These dragons are not property to be sold. They are our partners, our brothers in battle. My grandfather died defending Skyrender during the siege of Antares. His spirit would curse us all if we trade away our sacred guardians." Day-One finally turned to face the young man. Minho was everything the elder had been 50 years ago, proud, strong, and certain that honor mattered more than survival. The old man envied him that certainty. "Your grandfather was a good man and a brave warrior," Day-One said slowly. "But he is dead, and we are not. The living must make choices that the dead cannot understand." "There has to be another way," Minho insisted. "We could fight. Rally the other clans. Send messages to our allies in the outer systems." "What allies?" Su-Jin asked bitterly. The hegemony has been hunting down dragon clans for 20 years. The Kethmaran clan was wiped out at the Battle of Seven Suns. The Torgeth sold their dragons to mercenary companies 5 years ago. The Naltek gave up their mounts and became traders. We are the last, Minho. The very last. The young warrior's face went pale. Then we die fighting. That is the way of our people. That was the way of our people, Daewon corrected gently. But our people are not just warriors anymore. They are teachers and engineers and farmers and children who have never seen a battle. Would you have me let them all die for the sake of 3 dragons? Minho opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. The weight of those words settled on him like a heavy cloak. 30,000 lives balanced against 3 dragons, no matter how sacred. A new sound echoed from deeper in the caves, a mournful song that made the stone walls vibrate. Voidclaw was calling to her mate. The black dragon had laid 12 eggs in her lifetime, but none had hatched in the poisoned air of their dying world. She was mourning before she even knew what was coming. The buyers, Daewon said quietly. Tell me about them. Sujin consulted her datapad again. Skyrender goes to a private collector on Nexus Station. The man owns the largest entertainment complex in the sector. He promises the dragon will be well cared for. Entertainment, Minho spat. They will make him fight in gladiator pits for the amusement of criminals and gamblers. Voidclaw has been purchased by a military contractor, Sujin continued, ignoring the interruption. They want to study dragon combat abilities for their weapons research program. And Starfire? A museum on the core world of Centralis. They plan to put her in a stasis chamber as part of an exhibit on extinct galactic species. The irony was not lost on any of them. The dragons would be preserved as curiosities while their people scattered to the winds like refugees. Daewon walked to the second cave where Voidclaw waited. The great black dragon was twice the size of her mate, with scales that seemed to absorb light itself. Her eggs lay scattered around her feet, each one the size of a human torso and worth more than most planets. But they would never hatch now. I know you understand, he said to the dragon. Your children are already dead, but ours might yet live. Voidclaw lifted her massive head and looked at him with eyes like burning coals. For a moment, Daewon thought she might refuse to go. Dragons could not be forced to do anything against their will. If she chose to fight, no power in the galaxy could make her leave this cave. Instead, she lowered her head in what might have been acceptance or resignation. The third cave held Starfire, youngest of the 3 at barely 50 years old. Her golden scales still gleamed with the fire of youth, and her wings were strong enough to carry her between worlds without rest. She should have been the mother of a new generation of dragons. Instead, she would spend eternity sleeping in a glass cage. The transport crews are asking when they can begin loading, Sujin said softly. Daewon closed his eyes and spoke the words that would end 1,000 years of tradition. Tell them to begin. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. Massive loading platforms were brought down from orbit, each one designed to carry a single dragon in comfort and safety. The buyers had spared no expense. The cages were works of art, decorated with precious metals and equipped with the finest life support systems money could buy. But they were still cages. One by one, the dragons allowed themselves to be led into their prisons. They could have resisted. They could have burned the transport crews to ash with their breath, or torn the loading platforms apart with their claws. Instead, they walked quietly into captivity, understanding somehow that their sacrifice would save the people they had protected for so long. As Skyrender's transport sealed shut, the great dragon let out a cry that echoed through the caves and up into the city above. It was a sound of loss and sorrow that made every Villani who heard it stop what they were doing and bow their heads in shame. The transports lifted off one by one, carrying their precious cargo toward ships waiting in orbit. Day-Wan watched from the cave entrance until the last one disappeared into the gray sky. Then he turned and walked back into the darkness, leaving footprints in the dust that had been disturbed by dragon claws for the last time. "Elder," Minho called after him. "What? Happens now?" Day-Wan stopped but did not turn around. When he spoke, his voice was barely a whisper, but it carried clearly in the empty chamber. "Now we learn to live without dragons, and we remember what we have lost, so that perhaps one day our children's children might reclaim it." Above them, the evacuation ships began their engines, preparing to carry the survivors of the Vellani clan to a new world where they would be strangers and refugees instead of lords of the sky. The age of dragons was over. The age of exile had begun. 5 years had passed since the great dragons left Corvex Prime forever. 5 long years of backbreaking work in the dust and heat of Baron's Edge. A frontier world so harsh that even the hegemony considered it barely worth claiming. The Vellani clan, once masters of 12 worlds and riders of the great sky beasts, now spent their days digging precious metals from deep underground tunnels. Kai-Jun wiped sweat from his forehead as he emerged from Mineshaft 7, his clothes soaked through, with the sticky humidity that filled the tunnels. His hands, once steady enough to guide a dragon through the narrow canyons of Veltar, now shook from exhaustion after 12 hours of operating heavy drilling equipment. Behind him, 20 other Vellani workers stumbled into the pale morning light. Their faces were gray with rock dust, and their backs bent from years of carrying heavy loads through cramped passages. These men had once been pilots and dragon keepers, engineers who maintained the great flying cities and warriors who defended clan territory across half the galaxy. Now they were just another crew of contract miners, earning barely enough credits to feed their families. "Move along, dirt scratchers!" shouted Overseer Vance, a thick-bodied man from the core worlds who took obvious pleasure in humiliating the former Sky Lords. "The morning shift wants to get started, and your stink is making them sick." Kai-Jun bit back the angry words that wanted to pour from his mouth. 5 years ago, he would have challenged any man who spoke to him that way. 5 years ago, he could have called down Voidclaw from the clouds to teach respect to anyone foolish enough to insult the Vellani clan. Now he just kept walking toward the transport that would carry him back to the refugee settlement they called home. "Hey, Dragon Boy," Vance called after him. "I heard there was another one of your flying lizards in the news feeds yesterday. Killed 3 people in some rich man's fighting ring before they put it down with plasma cannons." Kai-Jun stopped, walking. His fellow workers gathered around him, their faces dark with barely controlled rage. Everyone knew the Overseer was lying. Dragons did not kill without cause, and they certainly did not die easily to human weapons. But the man enjoyed twisting the knife of their shame. "That is not true," Kai-Jun said quietly. "Are you calling me a liar, dirt scratcher?" Vance stepped closer, his hand moving to the shock baton at his belt. "Maybe you need a reminder about who gives the orders around here. Leave him alone." The voice came from Ha-Un, who had just emerged from the administrative building where she worked as a data clerk. At 19 years old, she was the daughter of Master Yong-Su, who had been the clan's greatest dragon keeper before the evacuation. She had inherited her father's fierce spirit, but not his wisdom about when to keep quiet. "Well, well," Vance said with a nasty smile. "If it isn't the little princess. Tell me, girl, did your daddy really used to talk to dragons? Or was that just another one of your people's fairy tales?" Ha-Un's dark eyes flashed with anger. "My father could speak with any dragon in our care. He knew their thoughts and feelings as clearly as if they were human. Too bad he couldn't teach them to be more useful," Vance laughed. "I hear the galaxy is doing just fine without your precious flying pets. Maybe better since there are fewer monsters eating livestock and burning down cities. Dragons never harmed innocent people," Ha-Un said, stepping closer despite the warning looks from the other workers. They protected this galaxy for thousands of years before your hegemony decided that anything powerful had to be destroyed or enslaved. Vance's face went red with anger. You little witch! I think you need to learn some respect. He raised his shock baton, but Kai-Jun moved between them before the weapon could fall. The older man was tired and weak from years of hard labor, but he was still faster than the soft-core world overseer. Enough, Kai-Jun said firmly. We are going home now. There will be no more talk. For a moment, it looked like Vance might try to fight anyway. Then he seemed to remember that even broken-down Villani warriors were still dangerous when cornered. He lowered his weapon but kept his ugly smile. Get out of here, all of you. And remember, tomorrow is productivity review day. Anyone who does not meet their quotas gets transferred to the deep shafts. The deep shafts were a death sentence. The tunnels went down more than a mile into the planet's crust, where the heat could cook a man alive and cave-ins happened almost daily. No one who went down there lasted more than a few months. The transport ride back to the settlement passed in silence. The other workers stared out the windows at the barren landscape, their thoughts no doubt turning to memories of better times. Kai-Jun closed his eyes and tried not to think about Voidclaw, wondering if she was still alive somewhere in the galaxy or if she had joined Skyrender in whatever afterlife awaited dragons. The Villani settlement sat in the shadow of a low mountain. Range, protected from the worst of the planet's sandstorms, but still exposed to the brutal heat of its twin suns. Prefabricated buildings housed nearly 8,000 people, all that remained of a clan that had once numbered in the millions. Elder Day One waited for them at the settlement gates, his aged face grave with worry. At 75, he was one of the few people old enough to remember the clan's golden age. The weight of their fall seemed to have settled on his shoulders like a physical burden. There is news, he said quietly as the workers gathered around him. Bad news from across the galaxy. Ha-Un felt her heart sink. The dragons? Daewon nodded slowly. A message came through the civilian networks this morning. Starfire. He paused, struggling with the words. They say she died in her stasis, chamber on Centralis. Some kind of system failure in the museum's power grid. The silence that followed was broken only by the wind whistling through the settlement's metal buildings. Starfire had been the youngest of their dragons, barely 50. Years old with centuries of life ahead of her. She should have been flying between the stars, carrying riders to distant worlds and raising young of her own. Instead, she had died alone in a glass cage, displayed like a trophy from a dead civilization. How? Ha-Un whispered. The official. Report says equipment malfunction, Daewon replied. But there are other stories. Rumors that she was trying to break free from the stasis field. That she died fighting to escape. Minho, who had been standing silent at the edge of the group, suddenly spoke up. Good. Better to die fighting than to live as their pet. Several people turned to stare at him. The young warrior had changed, much in 5 years of exile. His face was harder now, marked by scars from mining accidents and fights with other workers. His body was lean and tough from constant labor, but his eyes still burned with the old fire. You should not say such things, one of the older women scolded. The dragons died so that we could live. Did they? Minho asked bitterly. Look around you. Look at what we have become. We scratch in the dirt for scraps while the hegemony grows fat on the wealth of worlds we once protected. Our children. Forget the old stories. Our young people marry outsiders and take their names. In 2 generations, there will be nothing left of the Villani but faded memories. At least we are alive, Kai-Jun said quietly. Are we? Minho shot back. When was the last time you felt truly alive, old friend? When was the last time any of us stood proud instead of bowing our heads to men like Overseer Vance? Ha-Un found herself nodding along with his words. For 5 years, she had tried to accept their new life, to find meaning in small pleasures and simple survival. But Minho was right. They were not truly living. They were just slowly dying in a more comfortable way than their ancestors would have chosen. That night, unable to sleep, Ha-eun made her way to the settlement's small library. Most of their books and records had been lost during the evacuation, but a few precious items had been saved. She pulled out a sealed container from behind the historical texts and carefully opened it. Inside were her father's private journals, written in the old clan script that few people could read anymore. Page after page described the deep bond between dragon and keeper, the mystical connection that allowed two different species to share thoughts and feelings across the vast distances of space. According to the journals, the relationship had been much more than simple partnership. Dragons and Vallani had enhanced each other, creating a combined intelligence that was greater than either species alone. The dragons provided raw power and instinctive wisdom, while the Vallani offered focused will and tactical thinking. Together, they had been unstoppable. Ha-eun read until dawn, absorbing knowledge that had been passed down through 50 generations of dragon keepers. Her father had hidden these secrets, hoping that someday the clan might need them again. As she read about the ancient bonding rituals and the lost arts of dragon communication, she began to understand what they had truly lost. It was not just their dragons that were gone, it was their identity, their purpose, their very souls. The next morning brought fresh humiliation. News reports from across the galaxy told of hegemony forces discovering the clan's old burial grounds on Corvex Prime. Despite the planet's poisoned atmosphere, mining crews were already stripping away the sacred sites to harvest rare metals from beneath the ancient tombs. "They are grinding our ancestors into industrial paste," Minho said bitterly as The transport ship that landed at Barron's Edge spaceport was nothing special to look at. Its hull was scratched and dented from years of travel between frontier worlds, and its engines made the kind of noise that suggested they needed major repairs. The cargo haulers and fuel technicians barely glanced at it as it settled onto landing pad 12 with a cloud of dust and steam. But Ha-eun noticed it immediately. She was working her shift at the spaceport's administrative office, processing shipping manifests and cargo declarations when the ship's registration crossed her screen. The vessel was registered to Commander Jae-ho Park, United Earth Military Engineering Corps. More interesting was the cargo manifest. It listed only personal effects and research equipment. No Earth military officer had visited Barron's Edge in the 5 years since the Vallani settlement was established. The planet was too remote and too poor to interest the major powers. Whatever brought this man here, it was not routine business. Ha-eun watched through the office windows as the ship's cargo ramp lowered. A single figure emerged, wearing a standard military jumpsuit with no visible rank insignia. He was of medium height with dark hair and the kind of steady movements that suggested either combat training or years of working with dangerous machinery. He carried a sealed data case in one hand and what looked like equipment schematics in the other. The man walked directly to the Port Authority building, ignoring the curious stares of dock workers and traders. Ha-eun quickly minimized her work files and pulled up the visitor processing system. If he needed permits or documentation, she would be the one handling his paperwork. "Excuse me?" the stranger said as he approached her desk. His voice carried a slight accent that Ha-eun could not place. "I need to speak with someone in authority about arranging a meeting with the Vallani clan elders." Ha-eun felt her heart skip a beat. In 5 years, no outsider had ever asked to meet with their people. The hegemony administrators dealt with clan representatives when necessary, but they never requested formal meetings with the elders. "May I ask the purpose of your visit?" she said, trying to keep her voice professional. The man set his data case on her desk and activated a small holographic display. Floating in the air above the device was a 3-dimensional image that made Ha-eun gasp out loud. It was a dragon, not a photograph or artistic rendering, but a detailed technical scan showing bone structure, muscle groups, and neural pathways. "My name is Commander J-Ho Park," he said quietly. "I am here on behalf of Earth's Advanced Weapons Research Division. We need to discuss a matter of mutual interest regarding dragons and the people who once bonded with them." Ha-Un stared at the hologram, her mind racing. "The dragons were sold years ago. Our people have no connection to them anymore." "I know about the sale," J-Ho replied. "I also know that legal ownership and spiritual bonding are two very different things. The question is whether your people would be interested in exploring the possibility of restoring what was lost." Before Ha-Un could respond, Overseer Vance pushed through the office doors. The big man's face was red with anger, and his hand rested on his shock baton as he approached J-Ho. "You need to move your ship," Vance said loudly. "That landing pad is reserved for authorized hegemony vessels only. Freelance traders park in the outer ring." J-Ho turned to face him with calm eyes. "I have proper documentation for my landing assignment. Would you like to see my permits?" "I do not care what fake papers you brought from whatever backwater world you came from," Vance snarled. "This is my spaceport, and I decide who lands where." The commander's expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted slightly. Ha-Un recognized it as the stance of someone preparing for trouble. "I am here on official Earth military business. Are you saying you want to interfere with that business?" Vance hesitated. The hegemony might control this sector of space, but Earth was still a major power with its own sphere of influence. Interfering with their military personnel could create diplomatic problems that a simple overseer was not equipped to handle. "Just keep your visit short," Vance muttered, then turned and stalked out of the office. J-Ho watched him go, then turned back to Ha-Un. "Friendly local administration?" "He treats everyone that way," Ha-Un said. "Especially us." "Us?" "The Vellani. We are considered refugees here, barely tolerated as long as we provide cheap labor for the mining operations." J-Ho nodded thoughtfully. "That matches what I learned from my research. Your people went from ruling 12 worlds to working in mines. That must be difficult to accept." Ha-Un found herself studying his face, looking for signs of the pity or contempt she usually saw from outsiders who learned about their fall. Instead, she saw genuine interest and what might have been respect. "Why are you really here?" she asked. "To offer your people a chance to fly again," he said simply. 2 hours later, Ha-Un led J-Ho through the dusty streets of the Vellani settlement. Word of the stranger's arrival had spread quickly, and people gathered in doorways and windows to watch them pass. Children who had never seen anyone from outside their community stared with wide eyes. Adults whispered in the old clan language, speculating about what this visit might mean. Elder Day-Wan waited for them in the settlement's council chamber, a simple prefabricated building that served as their community center. Despite his age and the hardships of recent years, the old man still carried himself with the dignity of someone born to leadership. "Commander Park," Day-Wan said as they entered. "Ha-Un tells me you wish to discuss dragons. That is a painful subject for our people." "I understand," J-Ho replied, "and I will not waste your time with false promises or empty hopes. What I have to show you is real, but it will require courage and trust from your people." He activated his data case again, but this time the hologram that appeared was not of a dragon. Instead, it showed a sleek, mechanical construct that looked like a marriage between a fighter craft and a suit of armor. The machine was roughly humanoid in shape, but built for speed and agility rather than raw strength. "This is the Dragonheart, Mark 7, J-Ho explained, an experimental combat mech designed by Earth's best engineers. It incorporates neural interface technology that allows pilot and machine to function as a single unit. Day-Wan leaned forward, studying the image with interest. "It is impressive, but I do not understand what this has to do with dragons or my people. The neural interface works, but only to a limited degree. Jeho continued. Human pilots can control the mech's basic functions, but they cannot achieve true symbiosis with the machine. We have hit a wall in our research, and conventional approaches are not working. He gestured, and the hologram changed to show brain scans and neural pathway diagrams. Then our xenobiologist discovered historical records of the bond between dragons and their riders. The level of mental connection your people achieved was far beyond anything we thought possible. Two completely different species sharing thoughts and coordinating actions with perfect precision. Ha-Yun felt her pulse quicken. You want to study our bonding techniques? More than that, Jeho said. I want to learn if it is possible to create a similar bond between human pilots and mechanical systems. The potential applications are enormous, but the real goal is to develop technology that could help restore your people's place in the galaxy. Day One was quiet for a long moment, his weathered hands folded in his lap. When he finally spoke, his voice was carefully neutral. Even if such a thing were possible, our dragons are gone. What good would bonding techniques be without dragons to bond with? That is where things get interesting, Jeho said with a slight smile. I have been tracking your dragons across the galaxy for the past 2 years, Skyrender, Voidclaw, and Starfire. I know where they are and who owns them. Starfire is dead, Ha-Un said quickly. No, she is not. Jeho's smile widened. That is what the official reports say, but my sources tell a different story. The stasis chamber malfunction was staged. Someone wanted the galaxy to think she was dead while they moved her to a secret location. Daewon stood up suddenly, his eyes bright with hope for the first time in years. You know where she is? I know where all 3 of them are, and I have a plan to get them back. Jeho deactivated the hologram and looked directly at the Elder. But I will need help from your people. The knowledge of dragon bonding that your ancestors developed over thousands of years that cannot be learned from books or computer files. It has to be taught by someone who understands the spiritual connection between rider and mount. The bonding rituals were lost when our last dragon keepers died, Daewon said sadly. The knowledge went with them. Ha-Un pulled her father's journals from her bag. Not all of it. Both men turned to stare at her. She opened one of the journals, to a page covered with detailed diagrams and notes written in the old script. My father was Master Yongsu, the greatest dragon keeper of his generation. He hid his journals before the evacuation, hoping that someday they might be needed again. Everything is here, the bonding ceremonies, the mental preparation techniques, the methods for establishing psychic connection with dragon minds. Jeho reached out to touch the ancient book, then stopped himself. May I? Ha-Un nodded and handed him the journal. He opened it carefully, studying the 3 weeks after Commander Jeho's arrival, the old mining facility on the edge of the settlement had been transformed into something that looked like a cross between a workshop and a temple. Ancient Vellani bonding circles had been carved into the concrete floor alongside workbenches covered with advanced earth technology. The smell of burning incense mixed with the sharp odor of welding equipment and electronic components. Minho stood in the center of the largest bonding circle, his eyes closed and his breathing slow and steady. Electrodes attached to his temples monitored his brain activity while Ha-Un chanted the old preparation songs that her father had taught her. Around them, Jeho's experimental equipment hummed and beeped as it recorded every neural fluctuation. Focus on the memory of flight, Ha-Un said softly in the clan language. Remember what it felt like to soar through the clouds with Skyrender. Let that feeling fill your mind. Minho's brain patterns spiked on the monitoring equipment. For a moment, the readings looked almost identical to the ancient records of dragon rider bonding that Ha-Yun had translated from her father's journals. Then the pattern collapsed, and Minho opened his eyes with a frustrated sigh. It is not working, he said, pulling off the electrodes. I can remember flying with Skyrender, but I cannot feel the connection anymore. The bond is broken. Jeho studied the readouts on his tablet, his face thoughtful. The neural pathways are still there. I can see the traces of the original bonding, patterns in your brain structure, but something is blocking the connection from reforming. Distance, Elder Day One said from where he sat watching the experiments. The bond was never meant to work across light years of space. Dragon and Rider must be close to each other, ideally within the same star system. Then we need to get closer to the dragons, Jeho said. Which brings us to the plan I mentioned when we first met. He activated a holographic display that showed a detailed three-dimensional map of Nexus Station, the massive space habitat that served as the sector's largest trading hub and entertainment center. The station was home to over 50 million beings from hundreds of different species, making it one of the most diverse and chaotic places in known space. Skyrender is being held here, Jeho said, pointing to a section of the station marked in red. Level 47, in the private arena complex owned by crime boss Viktor Kazansky. The dragon has been chemically modified to enhance his aggression and pain tolerance for gladiator fights. Ha-Yun felt sick to her stomach. They are making him fight for entertainment? 3 times a week, against everything from war robots to captured alien predators. The crowds love it because dragons are supposed to be extinct. Kazansky charges premium prices for tickets to see the last sky beast in captivity. Minho's hands clenched into fists. How do we kill this Kazansky? We do not, Jeho said firmly. Nexus Station is neutral territory, protected by treaties. Between all the major powers, if we start a war there, every government in the galaxy will hunt us down. We need to be smarter than that. He manipulated the hologram to show the arena's internal structure. The plan is simple in concept, but difficult in execution. I will enter the arena as a challenger, claiming that my experimental mech can defeat any creature they have. While I am fighting Skyrender, Ha-Yun will attempt to re-establish the psychic connection between dragon and clan. If it works, Skyrender should remember who he really is and help us escape. And if it does not work? Daewon asked. Then we improvise, Jeho said with a grim smile. Kai-Jun, who had been silent during most of the planning sessions, finally spoke up. This is madness. Nexus Station has security systems that can track a grain of sand through 1,000,000 cubic kilometers of space. How do you expect to smuggle a dragon out of the most heavily monitored facility in the sector? We do not smuggle him out, Jeho replied. We convince him to leave on his own. Dragons are not pets or prisoners. They are intelligent beings who choose their own path. If Skyrender remembers his true nature and decides to come with us, no security system in the galaxy can stop him. The next phase of preparation took another 2 weeks. Jeho worked day and night to modify his Dragonheart mech for combat in the arena's artificial gravity environment. Meanwhile, Ha-Yun practiced the ancient communication rituals until she could perform them perfectly, even under stress. The hardest part was explaining to the rest of the clan what they were attempting. Many of the older refugees thought the plan was suicidal. Some of the younger ones wanted to join the mission, but Jeho insisted on keeping the team small to avoid detection. If this fails, the clan needs survivors to carry on, he told them during a settlement-wide meeting. 3 people can slip through security. 30 people would be spotted before we even reach the station. Elder Daewon pulled Jeho aside after the meeting. Are you certain about this? Once you enter that arena, there will be no turning back. If Skyrender does not recognize Ha-Yun's call, he will try to kill you. I know, Jeho said quietly, but I have studied the combat recordings. From Kazansky's arena, Skyrender is not fighting with his full strength. Something inside him is holding back, even with all the chemical modifications. I think part of him remembers what he used to be. And if you are wrong, Jeho checked the power cells in his mech armor one more time. Then at least he will die fighting something that chose to face him instead of being slaughtered for the amusement of criminals. The journey to Nexus Station took 4 days aboard a smuggler's ship that Jeho had hired through his military contacts. The vessel was fast but uncomfortable, designed to carry small cargo loads through dangerous territory without attracting attention from pirates or patrol ships. Ha-Yun spent most of the trip studying her father's journals, memorizing every detail of the dragon communication protocols. The rituals had to be performed exactly right, or the psychic connection would fail. Worse, if she made a mistake during the bonding attempt, the mental feedback could leave her catatonic, or even dead. "Are you afraid?" Minho asked her on the second day of the journey. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also excited. For the first time in 5 years, we are doing something that matters. We are acting like Villani instead of just surviving like refugees." Minho nodded. "I keep thinking about what Skyrender must have endured. 5 years of fighting for the entertainment of beings who see him as nothing more than an exotic animal. He probably thinks we abandoned him." "That is why this has to work," Ha-Yun said. "We need to show him that we never stopped being his family." Nexus Station appeared on their view screen as a glittering wheel of metal and light spinning slowly against the backdrop of space. The massive structure was over 50 kilometers in diameter, with docking bays that could accommodate everything from single-person shuttles to kilometer-long cargo haulers. "Remember," Jeho said as they approached, "the station's traffic control zone? We are independent contractors here to participate in the arena games. Ha-Yun is my technical assistant, and Minho is security. Keep your stories simple and do not volunteer extra information." The docking process went smoothly. Nexus Station survived by welcoming visitors from across the galaxy, and the port authorities were used to dealing with unusual travelers. As long as their identification checked out and they paid their fees, no one asked too many questions. Level 47 turned out to be a maze of entertainment complexes, gambling halls, and private clubs catering to beings with expensive tastes and flexible morals. The Arena District occupied an entire section of the level, with multiple fighting venues ranging from small cage match setups to vast amphitheaters that could hold 100,000 spectators. Kazansky's private arena was somewhere in between. Large enough to host spectacular battles, but exclusive enough to maintain an air of luxury and sophistication. The entrance was guarded by security teams carrying military-grade weapons, and admission required either an invitation from Kazansky himself or enough credits to buy a small starship. Jeho approached the registration desk with the confident swagger of someone who had every right to be there. "Commander Park, representing Advanced Combat Systems. I would like to enter my experimental unit in tomorrow's championship match." The desk clerk, a blue-skinned alien with multiple arms, looked up from his computer terminal with obvious skepticism. "The championship match is reserved for proven gladiators and legendary creatures. What makes you think your machine is worthy of facing the dragon?" "Because," Jeho said, placing a data chip on the desk, "my machine was specifically designed to hunt dragons. I think your boss would be very interested in seeing how well it works." The clerk inserted the chip into his terminal, and his multiple eyes widened as he read the technical specifications. The data was carefully edited to show impressive capabilities without revealing the mech's true purpose, but it was enough to get Kazansky's attention. "Wait here," the clerk said, activating a communication device. "Mr. Kazansky will want to speak with you personally." 20 minutes later, they were escorted to a luxury suite overlooking the main arena floor. Victor Kazansky was a large human, with cybernetic implants covering half his face and arms that had been replaced with mechanical prosthetics. He radiated the kind of casual menace that came from years of violence and unlimited. The arena floor trembled as Skyrender was released from his holding cage. Even after 5 years of captivity and chemical modification, the great dragon still commanded respect through sheer presence. His silver scales had darkened to a dull, Gray and old scars crisscrossed his hide from countless forced battles, but his golden eyes still burned with an inner fire that no amount of torture could completely extinguish. Above in the VIP sections, 50,000 spectators roared their approval as the legendary Sky Beast emerged into the artificial sunlight of the arena dome. Holographic displays around the stadium showed close-up views of Skyrender's claws and teeth, while announcers in a dozen languages provided running commentary on his previous victories. Jeho stood at the opposite end of the arena floor, sealed, inside his Dragonheart mech and feeling very small compared to the creature he was about to face. The experimental armor was sleek and powerful, but Skyrender was the size of a small building with centuries of combat experience bred into his bones. "Remember," Ha-Un's voice crackled through his communication system, "do not attack immediately. Give me time to establish contact." "Understood," Jeho replied, though his hands were already gripping the mech's control systems as Skyrender began moving toward him. The dragon approached with the careful steps of a predator evaluating new prey. His massive head swayed from side to side, golden eyes fixed on the strange metal creature that had entered his domain. Chemical stimulants coursed through his bloodstream, designed to trigger rage and aggression, but something about this opponent was different from the others. In the hidden observation booth where Ha-Un and Minho watched, ancient equipment hummed to life. The psychic amplifiers that Jeho had built according to specifications from her father's journals were untested technology, combining human engineering with thousand-year-old Villani wisdom about dragon communication. Ha-Yun placed her, hands on the control interface, and began the opening ritual. The words came to her in the old language, passed down through 50 generations of dragon keepers, syllables that had not been spoken in 5 years. "Sky brother," she whispered, her voice carried through the arena's sound system on frequencies that human ears could not detect. "Child of storm and starlight, do you remember the songs of your people?" Skyrender stopped moving. His great head turned toward the source of the voice, confusion replacing the artificial rage in his golden eyes. The chemical implants in his nervous system continued pumping stimulants into his bloodstream, but something deeper was responding to sounds he had not heard since the evacuation from Corvex Prime. The crowd grew restless as the expected battle failed to materialize. Kazansky's voice boomed over the arena's speakers, urging his dragon to attack the challenger who stood motionless in his metal shell, but Skyrender seemed frozen, caught between 2 sets of programming, the artificial conditioning that demanded violence and the genetic memories that recognized the ancient calling songs. Ha-Un deepened her mental connection, drawing on techniques her father had taught her as a child. The psychic amplifiers translated her thoughts into the complex mixture of sound, emotion, and pure concept that dragons used for communication. Through the electronic link, she could feel Skyrender's confusion and pain, the constant struggle between his true nature and the chemical modifications that had been forced upon him. "I know you hurt," she said, tears streaming down her face as she experienced the dragon's suffering secondhand. "I know they have tried to break your spirit, but you are still Skyrender, Sky Brother, friend to the Villani clan. You are still our family." In the arena, Skyrender let out a sound that was part roar and part whimper. His massive body shuddered as competing neural pathways fired in his brain. The chemical implants were strong, but they were fighting against millions of years of evolution and the mystical bond that had connected dragon and rider since before recorded history. Jeho watched through his mech's sensors as the great beast struggled with himself. This was the moment of truth. Either the bond would reassert itself, or Skyrender would succumb to his programming and try to tear the Dragonheart apart with claws that could slice through battleship armor. "Come on, old friend," Jeho murmured. "Remember who you really are." As if responding to his words, Skyrender's head snapped up and his eyes focused with sudden clarity. The artificial rage drained away, replaced by recognition and something that might have been joy. He took a step toward the Mech, no longer stalking prey, but approaching a potential ally. The crowd erupted in confusion and anger. This was not the blood sport they had paid to see. In the crime boss's private box, Kazansky screamed orders at his technicians to increase the chemical dosages and force the dragon to attack. But it was too late. The bond between dragon and clan had been re-established, and no amount of artificial conditioning could break it now. Ha-Yun felt the moment when Skyrender's mind fully awakened from years of chemical suppression. Through the psychic link, she experienced his memories of the evacuation from Corvex Prime, the pain of separation from his people, and the long years of forced combat in this arena. She also felt his joy at hearing the clan songs again and his determination to protect the small metal warrior who had somehow become connected to his consciousness. "Jeho," she said urgently into her communicator. "He remembers everything. He wants to help, but the security systems are activating. They are going to try to recapture him." Indeed, blast doors were sliding open around the arena perimeter, and armed security teams were pouring onto the floor. Kazansky had apparently decided that losing one dragon was better than losing control of his entire operation. Jeho did not hesitate. He activated his mech's flight systems and launched himself toward Skyrender, extending one armored hand in the universal gesture of partnership. The dragon responded by lowering his great neck, allowing the small metal figure to land on his back between his shoulder blades. The sensation was unlike anything Jeho had expected. Through his mech's neural interface, he could feel Skyrender's thoughts and emotions as clearly as his own. The dragon's strength flowed through the connection, while Jeho's tactical knowledge and technological capabilities enhanced the beast's natural combat instincts. Together, they were something greater than either could be alone. Security forces opened fire with plasma rifles and particle beam weapons, but Skyrender was no longer the sluggish gladiator they had grown accustomed to controlling. Enhanced by his rider's technical knowledge, he moved with a speed and precision that turned the arena floor into a whirlwind of destruction. Blast beams that should have found their target instead struck empty air as Skyrender twisted through. Flight patterns that combined his natural agility with attack algorithms from Jeho's military training. The mech's targeting systems guided the dragon's breath weapon with computer precision, melting security barriers and disabling weapon emplacements without harming the personnel operating them. "The exit is blocked," Minho reported from the observation booth. "Station security is sealing the arena. We need another way out." Skyrender's response was to leap straight up toward the arena's dome, his powerful wings finally spreading to their full span for the first time in years. The reinforced transparasteel ceiling was designed to contain even the most violent gladiatorial contests, but it had never been tested against a fully awakened dragon working in perfect harmony with advanced human technology. Jeho's mech added its own firepower to Skyrender's claws and breath weapon, creating a focused assault that spiderwebbed the dome's surface. With a sound like thunder, the barrier shattered, and dragon and rider burst through into the open space beyond. Nexus Station's internal atmosphere rushed out through the breach, creating a howling wind that scattered debris across multiple levels. Emergency containment fields activated automatically, but not before Skyrender had time to orient himself and plan his next move. Through the neural link, Jeho shared his knowledge of the station's layout, while Skyrender provided the raw power needed to navigate through its mechanical corridors. They moved like a force of nature, unstoppable and magnificent, heading for the docking bays where their escape ship waited. Behind them, alarms wailed, and security forces scrambled to respond to a situation that no one had ever planned for. In 5 years of captivity, Skyrender had never displayed this level of intelligence or capability. The crime boss's carefully controlled arena had become a war zone in a matter of minutes. Ha-Yun and Minho reached their ship just as Skyrender and Jeho arrived at the docking bay. The dragon landed with surprising gentleness on the platform, his golden eyes bright with an intelligence that had been absent during his years of chemical suppression. "Can he fit in the cargo hold?" Minho asked, staring up at the massive creature. "Dragons are more flexible than they appear," Ha-Un said, remembering lessons from her father's journals. "And he wants to come with us. That makes all the difference." As if to prove her words, Skyrender began folding his wings and compacting, his body in ways that seemed to defy physics. Dragons had traveled between stars long before humanoid species developed spaceflight, and they had their own methods for dealing with the constraints of artificial environments. 6 months after Skyrender's liberation, the galaxy received news that shook every government and military organization from the core worlds to the outer rim. The hegemony's main fleet, over 300 warships strong, was approaching the insignificant mining world of Baron's Edge with orders to eliminate what they called a terrorist cell. What they found waiting for them was something that military historians would later call the most one-sided battle in galactic history. Elder Day One stood on the observation deck of the newly built Villani Command Center, watching through reinforced windows as massive shapes moved through the clouds above their settlement. Skyrender was there, his silver scales gleaming in the afternoon sunlight as he performed aerial maneuvers that would have been impossible for any mechanical aircraft. But he was no longer alone. Beside him flew Voidclaw, her black scales seeming to absorb light itself as she twisted through the air with deadly grace. The female dragon had been liberated from her military captors 3 months ago in an operation that had required the combined efforts of Jeho's expanding team and a group of sympathetic Earth Special Forces operatives, and leading them both was Starfire, youngest of the three, but somehow transformed into something magnificent and terrible. The Golden Dragon had never been dead at all. She had been in a deep, healing trance, preparing for the psychic call that would bring her scattered people home from the deep void between galaxies. But these three were just the beginning. As Dai Wan watched, dozens more dragons emerged from hyperspace rifts that opened like wounds in the sky itself. Some were ancient beings larger than battleships, their scales marked with the scars of 1,000 battles. Others were young adults who had been born in the deep spaces and had never seen a planet until today. All of them had answered Starfire's call. All of them had come to join the fight. "Fleet contact in 15 minutes, reported Captain Su Jin from the command center's main console. Her uniform was no longer the simple clothes of a mining supervisor. The Villani had reclaimed their military traditions along with their dragons, and she now wore the star-marked robes of a clan war leader. "Dragon squadrons report ready for engagement," added Ha-Un, who had become the primary communication link between the human technology teams and their dragon partners. The psychic amplifiers she wore allowed her to coordinate the thoughts and movements of dozens of dragons simultaneously, creating a hive mind that could outthink any computer system. Minho stood beside Jeho at the tactical display, both men, wearing the new hybrid armor that combined Villani traditions with Earth military technology. The partnership between human engineering and dragon mysticism had produced weapons and equipment that neither species could have created alone. "Remember," Jeho said to the assembled clan leaders, "we are not trying to conquer or destroy. We want to show the galaxy that there is an alternative to the hegemony's rule. Every ship we capture instead of destroying, every life we spare instead of taking, proves that dragons and their riders fight for freedom, not domination." The hegemony fleet dropped out of hyperspace precisely on schedule, their massive warships, forming the standard attack formation that had crushed dozens of rebellion attempts over the past 2 decades. Admiral Chen, commanding from the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Victory, had been personally chosen for this mission because of his reputation for eliminating problems with overwhelming force. "Sensors show approximately 50 small craft rising from the planet's surface," reported his tactical officer. "Configuration unknown, but they appear to be some kind of fighter aircraft." Admiral Chen studied the readings with confusion. Intelligence. Reports had indicated that the Villani possessed no significant military technology. They were supposed to be refugees and miners with no space combat capability. Yet the sensor returns showed craft moving at speeds that pushed the limits of known physics. "Open communication channels," he ordered. "Let me speak to whoever is commanding this pathetic resistance." The main screen flickered to life, showing not a desperate rebel leader, but a figure that made the Admiral's blood run cold. Elder Day 1 sat in what was obviously a command center, his weathered face calm and dignified despite the approaching fleet. But behind him, visible through massive windows, shapes moved through the clouds that could only be one thing. "Impossible," Admiral Chen whispered. "The dragons are extinct." "No, Admiral," Day 1 said in a voice that carried the authority of someone born to lead. "We are very much alive, and we are no longer alone." As if summoned by his words, the first wave of dragons burst through the cloud cover. Skyrender led the charge, his rider barely visible as a small figure mounted between his shoulders. Behind him came Voidclaw and Starfire, their riders moving in perfect harmony with their mounts. And behind them came dozens more, a living storm of claws and wings and breathed fire that turned the sky into a battlefield. The hegemony fleet opened fire immediately, particle beams and plasma cannons creating a deadly web of energy that should have vaporized any attacking force. But the dragons moved like nothing the fleet had ever encountered, twisting through 3 dimensions with impossible grace, while their riders coordinated attacks using technology that seemed to blend magic and science. J-Ho, bonded with Skyrender, through neural links that had been perfected over months of practice, felt every movement of his mount as if it were his own body. The dragon's natural combat instincts merged with human tactical knowledge, creating attack patterns that no computer could predict or counter. They struck the fleet's left flank first, dragon breath weapons enhanced by technological targeting, systems that allowed pinpoint accuracy over vast distances. But instead of destroying the enemy ships, they disabled them, melting weapon arrays and engine systems while leaving life support intact. "All ships, concentrate fire on the lead targets," Admiral Chen ordered, but his fleet was already in chaos. Dragons moved too fast and too unpredictably for conventional targeting systems, appearing and disappearing in clouds of their own breath weapons, while their riders coordinated attacks with superhuman precision. Voidclaw, carrying Minho as her rider, demonstrated why she had been feared as a weapon of war during the clan's glory days. Her black scales seemed to bend light around her, making her nearly invisible as she approached the hegemony command ship. When she struck, it was with surgical precision. Her claws tore through the dreadnought's main gun turrets, while Minho's plasma weapons disabled the bridge systems. But the real shock came when Starfire revealed why she was truly special among dragons. As the youngest of her kind, she had been born with abilities that her elders had lost over centuries of captivity and hiding. Her golden scales began to glow with an inner light, and space itself seemed to ripple around her as she opened rifts in hyperspace. Through those rifts came the dragons that had been hiding in the deep void. Ancient beings that had left known space when their younger cousins were captured and enslaved. Some were larger than the hegemony's biggest ships, their scales marked with the strange patterns that came from centuries of traveling between dimensions. "This is Admiral Chen to all hegemony forces," the fleet commander broadcast on all channels. "I am ordering immediate withdrawal. Repeat, all ships withdraw to minimum safe distance." But even as his fleet began its retreat, Chen could see that this battle was already lost. The dragons were not just winning. They were demonstrating a level of power and coordination that made the hegemony's military superiority meaningless. More importantly, the live broadcasts that were being transmitted across the galaxy showed something that shattered decades of propaganda. The dragons were not monsters or mindless beasts. They fought with precision and restraint, disabling enemy ships instead of destroying them, and allowing escape pods to leave safely when crews abandoned their vessels. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had been told that dragons were extinct and dangerous saw the truth. These were intelligent creatures working in partnership with their riders to protect the innocent and challenge the strong. Within hours of the battle's end, rebellion broke out on dozens of hegemony-controlled worlds. Species that had been conquered and oppressed for generations saw the dragons return as proof that the galaxy's balance of power was changing. The hegemony's response was swift and predictable. They declared the Vellani clan to be enemies of galactic peace and placed massive bounties on every dragon and rider. But their propaganda machine could not erase what billions of beings had seen with their own eyes. On Baron's Edge, the celebration lasted for 3 days. For the first time in 5 years, the Vellani danced the traditional sky dances, their movements mimicking the flight patterns of their restored companions. Children who had never seen a dragon rode on the backs of the great beasts, laughing with joy as they soared through the clouds. Hayun stood with her father's journals in her hands, watching as young riders learned the bonding rituals from dragons, who had preserved the knowledge in their ancient memories. The partnership between human technology and dragon wisdom had created something greater than either species could have achieved alone. "What happens now?" she asked Jae-ho as they watched. A group of Earth engineers,